And so it begins.
Hi, I'm R. Scott Gemmill. I'm the executive producer and creator of The Pitt, and you're watching IndieWire.
Charged! Clear!
We all need help from time to time. An occasional miracle.
Scott, the last time that you talked to my wonderful colleague, Chris O'Falt, you said that about the only thing that y'all hadn't quite gotten down in season 1 was the violence of doing CPR.
Yes.
So I'm curious how the CPR is going in season 2 and kind of what, you sort of brought to that, to this next iteration of the Pitt that you took from season 1, learnings that, were able to expand what you were able to do in season 2.
Yeah, well, CPR is still somewhat elusive to us because in order to do it properly is just so violent on a real
Yeah, you don't want to break anybody's ribs.
No, and traditionally you do a lot of times. So that's one thing we're still trying to perfect the faking of CPR. In terms of what we took from season 1, I think it was just really learning about how we all work together, and learning the speech patterns and the cadence and, just learning each actor's individuality and, reincorporating that into season 2. And, I think there was, there's always the worry about the sophomore curse. And we're that was something in the back of our mind, but we just tried to do the same, high quality show that we had done in the first season. We didn't want to really mess with it too much because it seemed to be working.
And especially it feels rarer than it should be for a show to come back as quickly on streaming as The Pitt did. So I imagine just keeping the reps going and doing the work was helpful. Yeah,
I think I finished we did our last mix on a Friday, and we were for episode 15, this finale of season 1, and we were in the writer's room on the following Tuesday for season 3. So the momentum was pretty much there from the beginning.
Amazing. I would love to ask a little bit about the writer's room. I mean, I'm sure that they feed each other, but how do you guys sort of think about the balance of character storytelling and the medical cases? Are you sort of doctors are talking a lot about AI, so that's something we want to confront? Or are you it would be fun to put Mel in a deposition, so let's figure out how to do that?
A little bit of both. Usually we'll start by thinking and looking at what we did the year before and what worked and what didn't, and if there's anything we want to change. And then, we look at the characters. We know we're going to, see them for 15 hours and what can happen within that, what's going to happen in that day for this individual. And then we go back and start all over again and start to figure out what the medicine is that will help tell those stories and support those stories or contrast with those stories. And then we go through the process of talking to all the experts in whatever field of medicine that we're going to portray or whatever storyline, and then we start to weave it all together.
Do you guys have a sort of giant whiteboard or a massive spreadsheet of sort of medical things that you can pull from the well? Or is it you're really not thinking about the mechanics of a collapsed lung until that's what makes sense for Langdon to be dealing with?
Sometimes it's both. We have, huge whiteboards, and there's whiteboards with individual episodes on them. There's whiteboards with a specific episode on it, that's being broken down. And then there's our pool of ideas of things that we, and it may just say something like a dog mauling. We've never done a dog mauling, or, do we see polio come back, So, and then, we pick and choose from there. Sometimes it really is, the medicine is usually whatever trauma is going on, whatever story we're telling medically, it's always to support something else, story-wise for the character. So we usually start with the story and the character and then build the medicine around it.
I wonder if it was at least as an audience member felt a little cathartic when the staff had to go back to analog boards. I was like, they're in a writer's room now. How fun for them.
Exactly.
Is this a drill?
Westbridge Hospital has shut down all the computer systems.
Are we next?
We're about to go analog.
Yeah, that was just the cyber attacks being such a growing problem with healthcare and hospitals, especially vulnerable. We just thought that would be something worth exploring.
I'd love to kind of drill down on that process you talked about generally with maybe a specific example. You did a very different birth sequence from season 1, and I would love for you to talk about how that was conceived and then executed, and how you sort of picked the constellations of characters who would interact with that.
Right. It was going to be the finale of this season. We knew we wanted to do some sort of trauma that would pull everyone in and sort of force Robbie to interact with Abbott, that he was going to need a bunch of different hands, and something that would incorporate everyone, so that in this scenario we knew it's something that's a pregnant woman, it's affecting the mom, but you're also trying to save the baby, so you get a full court press with everyone. So, and then the doctors came up with, an emergency hysterotomy, which is what we saw. And then once we decide we're going to do that, we have to plan that quite a while in advance, because we have to mold the actor who's going to play the pregnant woman. And the prosthetics, a lot of those prosthetics will take 8 weeks or more. So a lot of times we're casting that person 2 months or more before they're going to actually play the part. And then, that was a really challenging one, because, the nature of it is you open up the uterus and you pull the baby out of the amniotic sac. But every time we put once we goop the baby up and put it in the amniotic sac, all the amniotic fluid was washing all the goop off, so the baby was coming out all shiny. So those are the things you never plan on having to figure out. When I say figure out, I didn't have to figure it out. My special effects team did, but they did a great job.
It's a really affecting sequence, but also just so smart in the placement of the episode. Of, as you said, it gets Robbie and Abbott together. You kind of have all hands on deck. The ripple effect of it is what carries Robbie to Peds and the Jane Doe baby at the very, very end.
Yep.
You're picking cases that are able to sort of echo out in a really cool way.
That's, we're in that process now for season 3, and like I said, the medical cases are usually chosen to reflect something either that's going on in the characters' lives, to challenge them, to see a flaw. The medicine is sort of the mechanism by which we tell our stories about these characters.
One thing I was really struck by is just tropey TV, the kind of sense we all have of medical shows in our heads, would kind of put like just Dana in the position, or just Abbott in the position of being the person to talk to Robbie. But you really have so many different characters know he's not okay and confront him over the course of the season. And I would love for you kind of to talk about like the ensemble nature of your protagonist's storyline this year. And you really do a phenomenal job of showing how mental health is like a village.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the nature of the ER. It takes a lot of people. It's a lot like television, it takes a lot of people to get the job done. And these people interact with each other on a daily basis in some of the most challenging situations. So their lives are intertwined. And so when one of them seems to be struggling, the others are there to try and help. The ER is a very special community, even within the medical profession. They're unique individuals, both the doctors and the nurses and everyone else that works there.
I mean, and you've been working with this team, you, John, and Noah, and a lot of the folks behind the scenes as well for a while. And I'm curious, kind of when you have sort of a core group of collaborators, obviously that sort of lets you all speak a similar language and kind of row in the same direction. But like, how do you stay fresh? How do you guys keep challenging each other?
I think just by not resting on your laurels, we don't, we just try and, push the envelope, push ourselves to do the best work we can, just try to be really honest with the writing. Our first job is to entertain, and, we take that really to heart, and that's what we try to do. But also, if we can educate a little bit every now and then, that's a bonus.
I had the pleasure a little bit earlier of talking to Lynn and Nita kind of about the intense continuity the Pitt requires.
It has its, pros and cons. We only have 15 hours in which to tell all our whole season's worth of stories, and there's a certain amount of practical information that you can get out within that time, and there's only so much character development or evolution that can happen over 15 hours if you're trying to be realistic. It's no one's over the course of our season meeting someone, falling in love and falling out of love in 15 hours. It's so you have to pick and choose, and I think you have to be very succinct with the storytelling and precise, because you don't have the luxury of being able to jump time in between episodes to fill in information that way. So it's a challenge, but it's one of the things that made it so good for us, in the sense that we'd done medical shows before, and there was no real reason to do another one unless we could figure out a way to do it that it felt new for us. We had to challenge ourselves, and this was the way we came up with it, and it's been it was a real challenge and continues to be so, but that's what sort of invigorates us and forces us to get out of our comfort zone, and that's where fun things happen.
I will say you have opened a little bit of a Pandora's box with the end credits of the finale.
That was a last minute thought I had, and I didn't know if anybody was going to go for it, but I'm glad we did it, and that was a sort of a gift for the fans. It was like a little Easter egg that I wanted to, I felt it was a great way to end for those two and to kick off for the next season with, I think it ends very hopeful.
Yes, it does. Fireworks, comforting a baby, karaoke.
the triumvirate.
Exactly. Although now fans are going to want a Santos full musical episode, I'm sorry to tell you.
Yes, I know. But if there's anyone who could do it, it's Issa.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'd love to ask you a little bit about the editing process, too, because, you guys are so meticulous in how you choreograph all of the medical procedures. You're so meticulous in the writing. And so I'm curious, kind of like, what are the big challenges in editing? Is it kind of about level of gore, or about the continuity, or just rhythm stuff? Like, what are you guys working on?
Yeah, I think it's mostly about capturing the rhythm. When we write the scripts, we all write with maps. We have maps of our sets that all the writers have at home, and we track everybody through the space. And then the directors, when they take over, they have a good working plan, and then they can adjust accordingly. And then the DPs help set up the shots, and we start to gather all the information we need for each trauma and whatever we're shooting. And then the editors, their assembly is to really capture that kinetic energy and that immersive feel that we have, and try never to, the key is to, and this is applies to writing and directing and acting and the editing, is that you kind of want it to be invisible ultimately. You don't want to think about how well it's edited or how well it's written. You want to be sucked into the story and only think about that stuff after the fact. And I think our editors are very good at that.
It's tremendous. And I will also say as just personally as a person who normally does not go for hospital shows and normally cannot handle a lot of viscera, shall we say, you guys do a fantastic job of kind of balancing the like physical reality and the severity of what these doctors are dealing with, coverage that is just of the people we care about, or, cutting back to someone looking at a computer so it never feels overly gory, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we try not to be gratuitous. We never do gore for gore's sake. There's always a story point behind it, and we do feel it's important to show what the kind of things that these men and women have to deal with every day, and sometimes it's horrific, and they have to just suck it up and go in there and fix people, and that's why we have, our show is really a love letter to what they do, and respect for how they handle these situations that most of us would freeze or faint.
I'm sure you can't necessarily think about it consciously in the writing, but the Pitt does really come across as that love letter and very kind of mission driven to get people to see healthcare workers as the heroes that they are. Is that part of the newness of doing a medical thing again for you?
I think that's embedded into the nature of the show, of a medical show. I think we don't try to deliver an agenda. We're more trying to just portray the emergency department as it happens, and let the audience decide what side of some of these issues that they fall on. Our job isn't to preach. It is ultimately to entertain and hopefully balance the stories as well as possible, so that you can fall on either side depending on your belief system. That's
a wonderful thing about something like AI in medicine this year, or the board's crisis is it's, if it was an issue that had a clear answer, it would have been solved.
Yeah.
Do you have sort of go-to people who can look at things with fresher eyes, or do you just try to think about an audience member who might be a little bit more squeamish or might not be as read into the medical stuff?
Yeah, well, I have such a diverse writing staff that I think everyone, there's a voice of just about everyone in there, and some people are. Some people can handle the gore, the writers, and some, they don't want to see the photos. They don't want to see the real stuff. And that's fine too. It takes a village, and, everyone brings something to the table. And that's the greatest thing about television for me, is that you have all these hundreds of people all working together with a common goal, with different skill sets, and they all, add something to the mix, and the end result is so much greater than any one of us could do. And that's how we make a show.
When I was talking to Lynn Powell, the costume designer, she talked about sort of the unreal background work that y'all have. Not just cast members helping out in scenes in which they're not the focus in, but actual nurses and patient profiles and tracking on maps where everybody is at every particular point. I'd love for you to kind of talk about the level of detail that you're able to build.
Yeah, we're so fortunate. We have wonderful background actors who are there, the whole season for the most part. And, so dedicated. Some of them are in a bed for 10 months, and we track all the background. They all have stories. They all have, props and, wardrobe, and times when they're supposed to be, that character is supposed to be fed, and times when they're supposed to be, have their labs drawn again. And in the writer department, we track that as well. But then the ADs also help with it, and it's almost like there's a whole different show going on in the background if you were to pay attention, and that helps add authenticity to the show because the nature of the set that Nina designed is very three-dimensional and works in a 360 with big long throws, and you can see into other rooms and into other hallways. And so we have to perpetuate that life of the ED that's going on all around, because you can basically turn. We don't use everything's practical. Our lights are all practical. So
yeah, it blows my mind that everything is just pre-lit.
Exactly. So and you can basically go and shoot in a 360, and that's why all the crew also wear scrubs so that if they get caught by the camera, they just look like they work there. So it's a really big process. It's a lot of work, but the end result, I think, really helps elevate the show. And I think it works on a level that a lot of times you're not even aware of, but viscerally, it adds to the immersive nature of the viewing experience.
Yeah. No, it would be very artificial if an ED wasn't crowded and moving at all times.
Right, and in order to do that, you have to put in the time and the effort to make sure that works by giving it the attention it needs.
The answer to this question is a little bit what happens in season 2, but you sort of mentioned one of the joys of getting to return to make a thing is you've learned the actors' rhythms a little bit, you have their voices, and you've kind of seen what works and can give them new things, play to their humor, all of that. I'm curious, looking back on season 2, what were sort of some of the gifts that you gave these characters that you were really happy to include in the season? What were some of the things that you were really excited to watch these people do?
Now I have to try and remember what happened last season. But,
you're in season 3. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's a rough question.
Robbie's journey was, important. Seeing him be off his game a little bit. That was a challenging season for Noah to play. Because he, has to modulate it, and we see him in doing things and behaving in ways that we might not appreciate. So that was fun. I was anxious to see Langdon coming back and his trying to make amends, and knowing that we were going to get him to a point in episode 14 where Robbie really, really pushes him. I was excited about that. I really wanted to tell the story of what a woman goes through after a sexual assault when she comes in to report it. I knew that Catherine was going to kill that, and she did. It's same with putting Issa through Santos through the works as R2, and then Mel. I mean, we just have so much fun writing for them. That I was looking forward to Whitaker driving away in the truck playing his funky music, and we just have a lot of fun. These characters become so real to us that we, and they should, because you're gonna want to spend time with them, because we're gonna be in the room, banging our heads against the wall for 10 months while we put the season together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really wonderful how vivid each one of them are, that it feels like a large ensemble, and that the audience cares about literally all of them. I had a friend text me asking when there's going to be a night shift Mateo-centric spinoff called Mateo After Dark. That's the level to which people are relating to people. It's great.
That's funny. I like Mateo After Dark. Sounds very sexy.
It does. And also just like how adult, for lack of a better word, not in the sexy way, but just like making Robbie really prickly and on edge this season, and pushing Langdon, and pushing Victoria, and pushing Al Hashimi, I imagine that there's a little bit of anxiety to do that with your lead and kind of do it without a net. But also I imagine that like having Noah gives you the confidence to push the character into darker places.
Yeah, and I don't think, as long as his behavior isn't inconsistent with what the character is going through, I think, I feel confident in that. And, we all have bad days, and we all have, misbehavior at times. And the Robbie is a flawed individual. He's a great doctor, but he's not always a great person, and that's just the reality. And in this day is a really bad day for him, in terms of his behavior towards others. He himself isn't having the worst day, but he's just dealing with some angst, and he's taking it out on the people he works with, and I think that's okay. And because it gives us somewhere to go in season 3.
Yeah, is there any no spoilers obviously, but is there anything that you are excited about that you kind of weren't able to sneak into season 2 you're excited to revisit in season 3?
No, not really. I think we did everything we set out to do. I think when we come back, I wouldn't say we come back with a clean slate, because we have left people, but we're jumping forward in time a little bit, as we always do, and then it's basically we come into the room and the boards have all been wiped down, and it's time to fill them back up again, and just start with where everybody was, where would they be, and where do we want to take them. And
also I would imagine what makes this day the one that we return to. You've done a couple mass casualties events. It seems like we don't check in on the Pitt doctors on quiet days.
No, I don't think we'll do a mass casualty event every year, because that will become a little tropey, I think, for us. So no, we're just really looking at what's going on medically now. What are the stories that should be told? What are the stories that need to be told? What's changed within the last year or so medically? What's coming down the line? What are doctors worried about? What's changing? And we just go from there, and take our characters on the next sort of leg of their personal life.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for talking to me about this.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks. Keep watching.